Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series Rescue the Rockies. And here in 2036, our Rockies are once again World Series champions for the fourth year in a row, the fifth time in 6 seasons. Probably the most remarkable thing is for the fourth year in a row, we faced off against the Chicago White Sox in the World Series. They gave us the best effort that they have in any of these World Series, taking a 3-2 lead against us heading into the final two games in Colorado. But we did have the pitching staff set up following a longer National League Championship series than we had hoped, that our ace Leo Martinez and our number 2 starter Noah Schultz were pitching the final two games of the series for us at home, and they ended up combining for 11 and 2/3 innings of 2-run ball over their two starts, striking out 12, allowing only 9 runners to get on base, as they both got the W's in Game 6 and Game 7 and propelled us to that fourth title in a row. So with the 2036 season in the books, time to turn our attention to getting ready for next year and our annual roster review and summary of the team and which directions we might look to go this upcoming offseason. Our 108 and 54 record ended up being 5 better than Pythagorean expectations. Great record in extra inning and 1-run games for us. Had a winning record every month of the season, probably not surprisingly given that we won 108 games. Outstanding offense, ranked second in the National League and the top 4 in every offensive category except for strikeouts. First in steals, first in base running, third in defensive efficiency, fourth in zone rating, and ultimately we were second in the National League in runs allowed. Pitching staff was in the top 3 in every primary pitching category except for our starters' ERA, which ranked 7th. So the team is in pretty good shape as we start getting ready for this offseason. Do have 2 big names who are potentially headed to free agency in Noah Schultz, who opted out the final year of his contract, and Ezekiel Tovar, who just completed a 5-year extension that we assigned him to 5 years ago. Luke Dickerson, who we signed as a minor league free agent with major league options this year. Chris Moon, who was a backup catcher for us for a few years, although he wasn't in the majors at all this year. Gary Mackey, who has been a kind of 4A guy for us, defensive player without much of a bat, also set to hit free agency. And then Ivan Luciano, who we rented as a backup catcher when our starting catcher got injured for this year. All set to be leaving the team as well. Also have a number of arbitration-eligible players we'll need to decide on, as well as a few team options involving the reliever Luke Little, the reliever Wellington Herrera, and the utility infielder Cody Schreier. And before we get into the position players and the pitchers, we'll take a look at the 3 major leaguers who ended up this season on the injured list. One is our starting catcher, Mike Girard. He tore the PCL in his knee back in late April, likely to miss most or all of spring training this upcoming year. 25-year-old who's a former supplemental first-round pick, is fragile physically, remains an outstanding defensive catcher with a bat that has a little pop in it, but ultimately only 66 at-bats this year. Definitely hard to rely on him. He's been with us for parts of 4 seasons in the majors at this point, and averaging playing just 51 games a year. That's the exact number he played in 2035. And this past season, of course, only played those 20 games before he got injured. When he's been healthy, he's been productive. He's averaged a 3 WAR over every 162 games that he's played, on pace for 25 homers and 91 ribbies over a full season. The question is just exactly how much of a season can we expect from Girard in any given season. He's also at a point in his career now where he's arbitration eligible, set to be making about $3 million next year. The other two guys who ended up on the IL, third baseman Rosniel DePaula, lost him right at the end of the regular season on September 26th to recurring back spasms that he's still trying to recover from. Had a nice year for us, hit 271, 32 doubles, 16 home runs, ultimately put up a 108 WRC plus and a 2.6 WAR. So certainly a bummer that DePaula was not available for the postseason. Obviously, we still ended up winning without him. He's set to be making about $6.5 million in arbitration next year. So some of these guys who have been our youth over the past several seasons starting to finally get paid. Guy who not going to get paid for a little while unless we decide to try to sign him to an extension is Phil Dingwell. He unfortunately fractured his thumb midway through our playoff run, missed the end of the NLCS, and then he missed the World Series. Ultimately had a reasonably productive rookie year, but very volatile. Finished the year with a 234 average, did have 30 doubles, 4 triples, and 18 home runs. Scored 85 runs, drove in 72. Ended up close to a league average offensive player, almost a win above replacement. Certainly hoping for more from the number 29 prospect in baseball down the line. He is now officially eligible for the prospect promotion incentive. Clearly not expecting him to win a Rookie of the Year with the numbers he put up this year. Would certainly be a upset if he finishes near the top of the MVP voting in the coming years to earn a prospect promotion incentive that way, but at least we gave it a shot with Mr. Dingwell, who probably has an important role to play in our outfield going forward. We'll turn now to our healthy position players who scored a lot of runs and helped prevent a lot of runs with their good defense this past season. When I think about the team, we've got the opportunity to bring just about anybody that we want back, and there's probably not going to be a ton of turnover among our position players this upcoming offseason, given that we have performed so well over the last few years. That shouldn't be a problem. Girard is our de facto starting catcher, but Nate Harris has actually gotten a lot more action the past few years. Really worked out well that we picked him up in that trade with the Yankees a couple off seasons ago to upgrade our backup catcher position, because he's ended up being our starting catcher more often than not. Started 93 games a year ago. This year ended up starting 108 games for us, 17 homers and 54 ribbies. Did hit just 226, so he was a below average offensive player once again. He's put up WRC pluses in the mid to high 80s for us the last 2 years, but still more than a win and a half above replacement. Ultimately, he is a guy who is not yet arbitration eligible, so he'll be making the major league minimum next year. Certainly would think that Harris will be back with us. The question is whether he will be back with us as a starter or a backup, and some of that will be determined by what we decide to do with Mr. Girard, and if we do bring back Mr. Girard, what his health looks like at any given moment. Picked up Ivan Luciano as a rental to upgrade our backup catcher position. Honestly, he didn't do a ton for us. Hit just 245 at-bats, although he did have 6 doubles and 10 ribbies, even though he only had 9 hits. So he was pretty good with the extra base hits, put up a 93 WRC plus and was a bit above replacement level. Luciano, soon to be 30 years old, won the first World Series of his career. Very unlikely that he will be back with us, looking for $7.5 million over 3 years. So obviously would prefer to have the likes of Harris and even Girard over Luciano at those kind of prices. We'll turn to our infield. Ryan Stone, now 30 years old, former first-round pick out of UVA back in 2028. Very good consistent offensive player for us. Hit 285 with 27 homers and 94 ribbies this year. Also knocked 33 doubles, stole 16 bases, had an OPS of over 800, and a WAR of 3 on the season. He remains a very important part of our lineup. Not the greatest hitter we have, but just someone who's typically, our second, third, or fourth best hitter any given year, and just goes out and puts up solid season after solid season. Also popular with the fans. He is still signed for 2 to 4 more years on that contract we gave him very early in his career. $8 million for each of the next 2 years, and then team options at $8 million a year for the 2 years after that, before he'll likely get the opportunity to try free agency. Manuel Torres, guy who's 25 years old, former 10th round pick, split the year between AAA and the majors. Very effective with a .321 average, 3 homers and 13 ribbies in just 56 major league at-bats. Certainly doesn't look like he's got anything left to prove at AAA Albuquerque either. Like the captain personality, but ultimately he's a right-handed bat that we think can be useful at the major league level, but he doesn't bring a ton to the table defensively other than versatility. He is a guy who is out of options at this point, so I think we need to decide this year whether we're going to likely have him on the 26-man roster next year, and if not, he's a guy that we'll have to get through waivers to get down to AAA, so could be someone, if he's got a little bit of trade value, to help get a trade across the finish line for us in the coming weeks. Second baseman Derby Mahez, 27-year-old former first-round pick out of UCLA, fragile and relatively injury-prone. Did play 135 games for us this year. He had one relatively brief stint on the IL. Hit .243 with 23 homers, 72 ribbies. Also stole 25 bases for us. Ultimately was a slightly above-average offensive player. Put up a WAR of close to 4. He will certainly be back with us next year. He is now arbitration eligible, set to make about $4.4 million next year. The only question with Mahez is ultimately going to be his health. He could be pivoting, depending on what we decide to do with other infielders, to shortstop next season if Ezekiel Tovar doesn't come back, or if we decide that with Tovar's bat he's more of a utility infielder heading forward, but certainly expect that Mahez will be back with our Rockies in 2037. Johnny Castillo is a guy who was our IAFA signing back in 2032. The 22-year-old played all over this year, started in high A ball, promoted to double A, was going to finish the season in triple A, where he held his own, hitting .284 and 67 at-bats. But when Rosniel DePaula went out with that injury, we figured we'd bring up Johnny Castillo for the last week of the season and see how he could play for us. And he certainly indicated that he's probably not going to be leaving the majors anytime soon. Hit .296 with 2 doubles and 2 homers and 27 at-bats, 153 WRC plus. Ultimately could see him perhaps taking over at second base next year if we end up pivoting Mahez to short and having Rosniel DePaula back as our starting third baseman. So feel that our starting infield could be in pretty good shape. Castillo, his ultimate primary weapon is going to be his ability to hit home runs. He unfortunately wasn't on the 40-man roster before September, since we really didn't anticipate bringing him to the majors. So that meant he did not factor into our decision-making as far as potentially making the postseason roster, because that just was not an opportunity with Mr. Castillo. We signed Luke Dickerson as a minor league free agent. He ended up spending a good chunk of the year with us in the majors, although did not play a ton, hitting .206 in 63 at-bats. Did have 5 extra base hits for us in his limited playing time, but he is a guy who is not necessarily the greatest influence in the locker room. 31 years old, fragile physically, and he's looking for over $10 million a year for 3 years. So would tend to think that Dickerson will not be on our team going forward. One guy who probably will be, as this infield continues to get younger, is World Series most valuable player Trent Kaysen. Got some extra playing time in the playoffs, was basically in the lineup every day because of the injury to DePaula. And the 24-year-old who started just 55 games in the regular season made the most of it, as we noted, winning the World Series MVP award. Ultimately hit .261 in 234 Major League at-bats this year, 14 doubles, 9 home runs, put up a 111 WRC plus and a 1.3 WAR. Almost 25 years old. Don't necessarily see him being a big-time player for us. Looking at his ratings, probably a guy with that incredible home run power against left-handed pitching, who's in the lineup against lefties regularly, and then more of a utility guy after that, which was his role this year. But if you think about our infield with Stone at first base, potentially Castillo at second, DePaula at third, and possibly Mahez at short, a guy like Kaysen, who can play any position in the infield, looks like he could be a pretty important utility infielder for us for the next several years. And so, as I just noted, with potentially 5 infield spots wrapped up with Stone, Mahez, Castillo, Kaysen, and the injured DePaula, that's why we're likely moving on from Dickerson. That's why Manuel Torres' future is certainly up for doubt. And the other 2 guys we're going to talk about in a similar situation, Cody Schreier, we signed him to a extension this past year after he was a pretty regular starter for us in 2035. Viewed the 33-year-old more as a utility infielder for us this year, and he ultimately had a nice season. Only 219 at-bats, but did have 13 doubles, 10 homers, stole 5 bases for us. Batting average was only .233, but he did draw a good amount of walks to push his on-base percentage up to .320. Ultimately was an above-average offensive player with a 105 WRC plus, a bit above replacement level. He's could come back on a $9 million team option for next season, given what else we have in the infield. Tend to think that's probably a little bit of a luxury for us, and could definitely see us deciding to move on from Schreier. And what ultimately happens with Schreier, Dickerson, and Torres could be influenced by the big decision, which is what we're going to do with Ezequiel Tovar, the last player who's been around since we took this team over in 2025. The 35-year-old shortstop just completed a 5-year, $116 million contract with us, so he's finally potentially headed to free agency if we don't extend him over the next few weeks. Negatively, he's 35 years old, he's wrecked physically, and his bat is certainly not what it used to be, averaging about an 80 WRC plus for these last couple seasons. Positively, he's got a captain personality, some good influences in the clubhouse, still pretty good speed and base running instincts, and still a very good defensive infielder. Put up a 12.5 zone rating and a 1.086 defensive efficiency at short this year. He also played 144 games for us, all starts, never ended up on the IL this year. So although we did have 33 doubles, 6 homers, 6 triples, and 12 home runs to go with his 28 stolen bases, the .233 batting average and 171 strikeouts resulted in that 81 WRC plus, but still 3+ wins above replacement level. Looking for an extension. He wants 5 years, including a player option for his age 39 season at about $11.5 million a year, and also wants a role in the starting lineup guaranteed. Recent feedback, Undercover Boomer was constructive on us trying to bring back Tovar. Why me 943 less so. When I think about Tovar, a lot ultimately is going to depend on do we really think we're going to be pivoting Dervy Mahez over to shortstop? He doesn't quite have the range that Tovar has, but he's younger and he's actually a little bit healthier. And as I talked about, if we pencil in Stone, Mahez, Castillo, and DePaula as our 4 infield starters, and Trent Kaysen as a super utility guy who will be starting for us against left-handed pitching, how much do we really want to invest in someone who might potentially be our 6th infielder? Would love to have Tovar back with us as far as the influence in the clubhouse and just keeping the longest tenured Rocky around, but wrecked physically at age 35. This could be our exit ramp with Tovar. The 144 games that he played for us this season were the most that he's played for us in 5 years. He's definitely had a lot of injury issues. 2028, he got injured late in the season and missed the playoffs. 2029, he got injured late in the season and missed the playoffs, and he ended up so severely injured that he missed the entire next season. So there were 3 straight years for us where he wasn't available for the playoffs when he was in his late 20s. It's hard to kind of reconcile how much we think we should be able to count on him come crunch time, despite the fact that he was extremely healthy this year, given that he'll be 36 years old before next year's postseason begins, and he's probably not going to be getting any healthier. So as we've talked about, unless we make some transformative move at catcher, probably not a ton to do there, and there is only potentially 1 slot available among our infielders, which is why when we started talking about this, I indicated that we might not have a ton of change coming to this roster. And honestly, it's somewhat similar when we think about our outfielders. The issue with the outfielders is that you see that we've got 5 really good outfielders on the major league team at this point, and that doesn't even include the injured Phil Dingwell. So ultimately, probably need to move on from one of these outfielders, either Dingwell or the guys that we're going to talk about next this upcoming offseason, to eliminate a little bit of the logjam we have. It's certainly a high-class problem to have the number of really good and in most cases relatively young outfielders that we do, but might be able to help our pitching staff by trading away 1 or 2 of them in the coming months. Ted Miller is certainly one trade candidate for us, the 27-year-old left-handed hitter. Hit .257 for us this year with 23 homers and 78 ribbies. Did spend some time on the IL. Has been primarily a DH for us. Put up a 114 WRC plus and a 1.4 WAR. He's heading into his final arbitration eligible season, likely to be making somewhere around $12 million. The left-handed hitter is really effective against right-handed pitching, and that, similar to Ryan Stone, has been one of his hallmarks over his years with us. Kevin Waymont, 25-year-old, also a left-handed hitter, split the year between AAA Albuquerque and the majors, .258 average with 2 homers and 12 ribbies in the majors this year, season after he had 22 homers and 67 ribbies as a rookie. Basically got caught up in a numbers game. Was kind of a replacement level-ish player, a little below average offensively. Looking at his ratings, though, certainly think that he could be a useful 4th or 5th outfielder for us down the line. Mike Castro, first-round pick for us 2 years ago out of southeastern Louisiana. Did not do well when we brought him up in September after an MVP year in the PCL and AAA. Hit just a .130, 7 for 54 in 21 major league games, 2 homers and 7 ribbies, so an ugly 38 WRC plus, and he was well below replacement level. He's kind of following the similar path to Dingwell a year ago, where Castro will be a rookie for us next year. He's a top-ranked prospect, number 26 in baseball, and we would hope that he could be fighting for a prospect promotion incentive Rookie of the Year award next year. Durable, so we expect that he will be in the lineup. He is a guy that we are going to investigate, perhaps signing to a longer-term deal, something suggested by YME943, given his poor performance in the regular season. He did redeem himself and kind of show why we're excited about him in the playoffs. However, in the postseason, he went 11 for 31 for us, 3 extra base hits, drove in 5 runs, 355 batting average with an OPS close to 900 and a 141 WRC plus. So he did a really nice job for us in the postseason, and expect that we'll be seeing much more of Mr. Castro in the future. Anthony Pack Jr., 29-year-old center fielder, finished second in the National League with 54 steals this year. Also hit 16 homers and 73 ribbies. 83 WRC plus, but still a 3 WAR. He's won the last 2 Gold Gloves in center field. He's also a guy who's won multiple postseason MVP awards at this point, including the NLCS MVP for us this year. He is signed to a contract where he's going to be making $9 million for the next 3 years, and then we've got team options for a 4th and 5th season with him. Looking at his fielding stats from this year, 8.9 zone rating, 1.037 defensive efficiency, probably will get some continued consideration for a Gold Glove award as well. Definitely don't have anyone as good as him defensively, even if we think about the likes of Castro and Roberts Jr., who are pretty talented defensive players. But Pack's certainly the superior defensive center fielder, which will likely continue to encourage us to give him playing time, although some of you have suggested potentially moving on from him, given that he's so good defensively, and he is one of the potentially few left-handed hitters we'll have back on this team next year. I don't know if moving on from him makes sense. And one guy that we will definitely not be moving on from is Mr. Five Tools, Kevin Roberts Jr., the 28-year-old who we picked 5th overall back in 2026, has blossomed into one of the best players in all of baseball. He'd won 3 of the past 4 National League MVP awards heading into this season. A bit of a down year for him this year, I guess you could say. Don't expect him to be winning the MVP award, but when a down year includes 109 runs scored, 36 homers, almost 100 ribbies, league best 81 walks, a 30-30 season for the 3rd time in the last 4 years. It might be the 4th time in the last 5 years. Have to check on that. No, a 30-30 season for the 3rd time in the last 4 years, and a WAR of close to 5, and that's an off year. You know that you're dealing with a pretty good player. Kevin Roberts Jr. certainly has the potential to hold a number of Colorado Rockies records when his career is all said and done, and certainly appears in these early to mid stages of his career to be on a potential Hall of Fame trajectory. We signed him to an extension when he was young. The numbers starting to get up there, but certainly a lot less than he would be worth on the open market. We've got him signed for another 6 years going forward until he's 33 years old. So certainly expect Roberts Jr. to be a very important part of our lineup going forward. When we think about the team holistically, I mentioned the lefty hitters, and that's something that's going to have to factor into our decision making around the outfielders. Luciano, the left-handed hitting catcher, is not going to be back, as we've talked about. Stone will be back as a lefty hitting first baseman for us. But other than that, Miller, Wayment, and Pack Jr. are the only other lefties who are potentially on our lineup. I think when we look at what people are making and what they bring to the table defensively, I've been inclined to move on from Miller. But if we do move on from Miller, basically guarantees that we're going to have to be playing Pack Jr. in center field every day to ensure that his left-handed bat is in the lineup. And then the question is whether we force Waymont into the lineup against right-handed pitching, likely at the expense of a Mike Castro or a Phil Dingwell type. So there's definitely things to factor. I guess conceivably we could just go with one or two left-handed hitters in our lineup. But I think when I think about building a roster and a lineup that's ultimately going to be resilient against both lefty and righty pitching, certainly don't want to be losing more than one of these left-handed hitting outfielders. I just kind of question whether Ted Miller is the right one to be moving on from right now, given that he is certainly a better offensive player than either Waymont or Anthony Pack Jr. And before we move on to the pitchers, I did mention that the expectation is that Kevin Five Tools Roberts could have a number of Colorado records when all is said and done. The 218 home runs, he's already more than halfway to passing Todd Helton. Got a lot more work to do as far as the games played and the hits to get by Mr. Helton. Leo Martinez, already the all-time leader in wins with 95 and with 1,096 career strikeouts. Martinez will likely be passing his former teammate Andrew Painter, who we traded away to Baltimore midway through this season for the all-time lead in strikeouts among Colorado Rockies. So I've kind of mentioned this in several of you to comments to recent episodes, and some of you have kind of asked me whether with the dominance of these Rockies, whether we're going to move on to something else and whether we're getting bored with the Rockies. And I do like it when things are more competitive. I did try to set the settings for this, as we talked about way back in the first episode. Tried to tweak a couple things between OOTP 25 and OOTP 26 to try to make things a little more competitive for me. So I can't claim that I'm not getting a little bored with this just because the Rockies have been playing so well. That being said, I don't ever recall having a homegrown position player and a homegrown pitcher as good as Kevin Roberts Jr. and Leo Martinez, and I really want to kind of see their entire careers through. Obviously would like to continue winning with the Rockies, but really want to see what these guys can do over the courses of their fictional careers here in Colorado. As we talked about, it's not inconceivable that a decade from now, the only names that you'd see on this career team leaderboard would be Kevin Roberts Jr. and Leo Martinez, and I think it'll be fun to kind of try to chase that with both of them. So if you're wondering what the plans are for this playthrough in the future, I think at this point, given that it's already mid-October, and we're about probably more than halfway through the life cycle of OOTP 26 and getting to OOTP 27, hopefully coming out late next winter or early next spring, that we're just going to keep playing with the Rockies, hopefully over another 10, 15 seasons through the fall and winter here of 2025 into 2026. And before we take a look at the pitching staff, we'll just quickly take a look at some of the potential infielders who could be on the market. Mention that we might only have one open spot in our infield. Right now we're debating whether we bring back Schreier on his option year. We try to extend Tovar. Do we use Torres as our sixth infielder, or would there be somebody that we could potentially look to on the open market this upcoming offseason? Not going to go after a guy like Gus Gutierrez. I think I'd prefer someone who brings kind of middle infield skills. And there are a number of guys out there. The issue is most of the guys who are going to be available, or more accurately, several of the guys who are going to be available, are probably relatively expensive, in their 30s, and also a bit banged up. Sean Gamble, 30 years old, fragile physically, probably going to be very expensive. Jet Williams, 33 years old, fragile physically. Fabian Lopez, 31 years old, fragile physically. Jesus Made, 29 years old, soon to be 30, fragile physically. And when we think about an infield where we've already got the fragile Rosnil DePaula, who missed the playoffs, and the fragile Dervi Mahez playing pretty prominent roles for us in the infield, just don't know that adding another expensive infielder who's a little older and also fragile physically makes a lot of sense. Fortunately, there are some other options that might be a little more palatable. Maddox Maloney, 32 years old, guy who could certainly play second or short right now, could easily be trained to play third. Has been a league average-ish offensive player the last couple years, although at his age, probably trending towards a below-average offensive player. He's out there. Jairo Padilla, another guy, 29 years old, but at least he's normal in terms of his injury proneness, can play a number of positions, pretty good speed, switch hitter. So there's a lot to like about him as a potential option. Elian Pena, another 29-year-old, normal in terms of his injury proneness, really good speed, some positive personality traits, and a really good defensive player coming off of a nice year with the Mets. Wyatt Sanford, wrecked physically, so probably not the type of guy that we're going to pursue. We talked about our buddy Ezekiel Tovar, also wrecked physically and the oldest among this bunch. And then Cole Young, 33-year-old, normal physically, guy who can ultimately play multiple positions, has some speed, would give us another left-handed bat in the lineup as well. So when I think about potentially reuniting with Tovar, keeping Schreier around, or what there is to do with Torres, when I see, guys like Cole Young, Elian Pena, Jairo Padilla, Maddox Maloney potentially available, who are healthier and younger than the likes of Tovar, and in some cases would give us better speed or really good defense, a left-handed bat or a switch hitter in certain situations. There's definitely a part of me that thinks we probably decline the option from Schreier, let Tovar hit free agency, and then kind of see what who else hits free agency out of this group. Wouldn't rule out reuniting with Tovar or Schreier once they're on the open market. But again, if guys like Maloney, Padilla, Pena, or Young hit the market, it's not inconceivable that one of those guys could be less expensive than the likes of Tovar and maybe give us a little more health and vitality and youth in the infield going forward. And we'll turn now to our pitching staff. We already talked about how Leo Martinez came up big for us in game number 6 of the World Series. He's been an outstanding playoff performer for us. Technically a down year from Martinez, but when a down year is a 15-5 record, 2.79 ERA, a sub-1 WHIP, and leading the league once again in quality start percentage and pitcher WAR, there's definitely a prospect that Martinez could win a 3rd consecutive Cy Young Award for us. He's a guy who is signed for several more years at this point, and similar to Kevin Roberts Jr., really looking forward to see what Martinez can do for us over the course of his career. The huge decision that we have is the lefty Noah Schultz, who was the winning pitcher in Game 7 of the World Series. We signed him to a 6-year deal at $45 million a year with several player opt-out options 5 years ago. He had opted in every time until this offseason. So Schultz is potentially a free agent. Led the National League with 16 wins this year, 16-10 record with a 4.16 ERA. Mentioned that he has been with us for 5 years since the White Sox. Interesting that it was them in retrospect, the team that we've faced in 4 consecutive World Series in the 5 years since they moved on from him and he joined us, that they were the team that he previously played for. He has done everything we could have hoped. We've won World Series in the last 4 of the 5 years that we had Schultz on board. He was an all-star in his first 4 seasons with us, although he missed the all-star team this year. As I noted, led the league with 16 wins, still put up a 5.1 WAR for us on the mound, even though his ERA did balloon to 4.16. He struck out over 200 batters every season with us. Basically goes out, he goes 15-7 every year, strikes out a couple hundred batters. He's pitched 33 starts every year, hasn't missed a game for us, and he's put up an average of a 5.5 WAR for his seasons with us. Would have been happy to have him back next year, even at that $45 million level. I can't say I'm totally clear on his strategy. He's looking for only about $27.7 million a year for the next 5 years. Now, granted, that's a 5-year contract with a player option, so he's guaranteeing a lot more money. But I would think coming off of the season that he came off, you take the $45 million that's guaranteed for this final season, and then hopefully hit free agency healthy and well next year, and maybe look for lesser dollars then. So I don't have any fears about bringing Noah Schultz back on a paycheck in the $27, $28, even $30 million range for next year. The issue is the number of years going forward. He has been healthy for us, as I noted, but when we take a look at his scouting reports, his stuff over the last year is really deteriorated. It had kind of been a 60 forever, and we think it's pretty clearly a 50 at this point. He's lost a little bit of movement off of his pitches, still has very good control, and positively he hasn't lost anything as far as his velocity. But you can see the last 2 changes to his scouting reports were his current and potential stuff dropping, current and potential movement dropping, his overall ratings dropping, lost some stuff right at the end of last year as well. So I'm just not sure, given that he's 33 years old, whether we really want to commit to him for 5 more years. But we're definitely going to have a very big hole in our rotation behind Mr. Martinez if we don't bring Mr. Schultz back. We traded last offseason for Aaron Bell to become our 3rd starter. He was 13-7 with a 4.47 ERA, a WAR of close to 2. He's a guy who's set to make about $3.5 million next year. We'll certainly have the right-hander back. Bernie Barrera, 8-10 with a 4.19 ERA for us this year. Looks like a good, solid 4th or 5th starter, which is what we've typically been using him as. He's durable, which is always nice for a guy in the rotation. He's also set to make about $3.5 million next year. Certainly expect to have Barrera back. And then Gregorio Olvera ended up moving into the rotation for the last couple months of the season after we traded Painter away. Ended up 7-2 with a 2.88 ERA, working primarily as a long reliever through the first few months of the season before he did move into the rotation. WAR of over 2 this year. He's a guy who is still set to make the major league minimum next year. Certainly would expect that Olvera could be competing for a 5th spot in our rotation, or certainly working as a long reliever for us next season. So feel like we've got the number 1 part of the rotation figured out with Martinez. Definitely have the 3 through 5 figured out with Bell, Barrera, Olvera, and some other young guys in the organization. The question is, do we bring Schultz back as a potential number 2 starter? How many years and how much money do we have to guarantee him to bring him back? But certainly having a high-end starter who's a lefty in the mix for our rotation seems like something we should seriously consider. Moving from our primary starting pitchers to our outstanding bullpen, Adonis Valer, closer this season. He was supposed to be our closer last year, and he ended up missing most of the year, but bounced back well this year. League best 49 saves, 39 shutdowns to just 7 meltdowns, struck out 80 batters over 67 innings, put up a WAR of over 2 for us with that 2.28 ERA and sub-1 WHIP. Valer is signed for the foreseeable future, so he will be back as our closer for the next several years. Justin Gibson, signing him to an extension this offseason that was very front-loaded, $22 million for this year and then $15 for the next 2 to 3 seasons, was not the most popular universally decision that we've ever made. Some liked it, some did not like it, but when all was said and done, Gibson did exactly what he's done for us. Led the league in games pitched for a 5th consecutive year, led the league in holds for a 6th consecutive year, struck out a career best 123 batters over a relatively high for a reliever workload of 90 innings pitched, 3.20 ERA, 1.5 WAR on the season, and he'll be somewhat less expensive next year at $15 million as he heads into his 30s. So happy to have Gibson, who's been a member of all 5 of our World Series championship teams, back as we go shooting for a 5th in a row next season. Wellington Herrera, the lefty reliever, former closer for us, had an outstanding year, 1.76 ERA over 41 innings pitched. 4-4 record, saved a couple games for us as well, put up a 1.2 WAR. Good, solid left-handed reliever who's done a nice job for us after we've moved him out of that closer role. Chris Kennedy, who we signed to an extension last offseason, had a really productive year for us. Sub-2 ERA, 185 ERA, and a borderline ridiculous 133 strikeouts over 87 2/3 innings, 32 shutdowns to 8 meltdowns, a brilliantly low 0.68 WHIP, and a ridiculous for a reliever 3.6 WAR. Kennedy, the 25-year-old, locked up for several years at what we think is going to be a great contract for the Rockies, given that we did take a little bit of risk and sign him to an extension when he was younger. Melvin Reyes, former IAFA signing from 2031, made his major league debut in September, didn't allow a run over 7 innings pitched. Certainly view him as being in the mix to be a right-handed arm out of our bullpen for the next several years. Can say the same thing about these next 2 guys as well. Rich Hannon is a guy who is headed to arbitration, set to make about $3 million. The 28-year-old put up a 2.37 ERA for us over 60 2/3 innings as a middle reliever. Another solid year from Stricken Hannon, who we picked up in a trade with the Padres 4 years ago. Josh Joss, similar to Kennedy, is a guy that came up through our organization that we signed to an extension, coming off of a very choppy major league debut last year where he had a 7 ERA over 16 2/3 innings. Still decided to bring him on board for the long term, and he rewarded us, striking out almost 10 batters per 9 innings, 4-0 record with a 3.28 ERA, working 36 games out of the pen for us, 1.1 WAR. Similar to Kennedy, he is signed for a very reasonable amount for many years into the future. So the bullpen remains very loaded. David Guadron, first-round pick of ours in 2035, made his major league debut this year after a good year in AAA. was 1-0 in terms of his record, but had an ERA of over 5 in 28 and two-thirds innings. Guadron should be fighting for a spot in the bullpen next year. It's also conceivable, depending on what we do with Noah Schultz, that Guadron could be fighting the likes of Bell, Barrera, and Olvera for spots in the rotation behind Martinez as well. A guy who, given the number of big arms that we've already talked about and some pretty good arms in AAA that we'll be talking about next episode when we do our annual review of the farm system, that could find himself on the outside looking in is Luke Little. The lefty has been a member of all 5 of our championship teams after we picked him up in a trade with Chicago 7 years ago. 4.54 ERA for us this year. More of a lefty specialist at this point. He was below replacement level. Gave up a sickly 7 homers and 35 in two-thirds innings. When we got to playoff time, though, we put him into more of a lefty specialist role. He only pitched an inning and a third in our playoff run this year, but struck out 3 batters, didn't allow a run, and could have him back next year at a very reasonable $1.5 million. He's not willing to waive his no-trade clause, which will make things a little more difficult because he's probably a guy who does have some trade value at that number. But when we look at the fact that we've got 14 pitchers on this team right now, the likes of Little, possibly Guadron are the odd men out, I think, depending on what we do with Noah Schultz. Right now, I think I'm leaning towards trying to bring Schultz back. Don't know that I want to guarantee him 5 years. I think I would prefer to have team options in there rather than player options, and wouldn't necessarily mind paying more money to do it. When we look at the potential upcoming free agents as far as starting pitchers, the pickings are unfortunately relatively slim. Schultz and Eric Gordon are the top guys out there. Gordon, I don't love the personality traits, the limited stamina, and the fact that his second and third pitches aren't that great. He was very good for the Mets this year, and he's certainly younger than Schultz, but I tend to think I'd probably prefer to keep Schultz around rather than go after a guy like Eric Gordon. You look at some of the other big potential free agents, Jordan Woods recovering from a partially torn UCL, and then guys like Tobias Myers, Bubba Chandler aren't going to be that number 2 starter type that we're really looking for. Could say the same thing about Levi Sterling, although he is a guy who missed all of this past season with an injury, which is why our scouting accuracy is low on him. Also has some negative personality traits and is fragile physically. So when I look at the top-end starting pitchers who might potentially be available on the market this year, kind of pushes me to think about bringing Schultz back for the next few seasons and at least think about whether that's an option. As I said, I don't know that I want to give him 5 years. Don't want to give him a ton of player options that he can take advantage of, but I think he might be the best solution out there. Clearly, we're going to be investigating the trade market and investigating the options that we have available to potentially deal away an outfielder or 2 in the coming weeks and months. So that could be another way to potentially bring a useful arm on board. But quite honestly, when I look at what's available in the trade market and what we can realistically get, I don't think we're going to be able to pick up and trade somebody that's as good right now as Noah Schultz is. And so if we don't make a trade for somebody as good as Schultz and we decide to move on from Schultz, we're kind of just hoping that there's a random star starting pitcher among international free agents who happens to hit the market in a few weeks. And I don't know if that type of hope is really much of a strategy. So as we think about this upcoming off season, feel like we've got a lot of flexibility with the money that we have, and we don't have a ton of holes to fill. Definitely feel that the number 2 starter in the rotation behind Martinez is the most significant thing that we have to figure out. And we very well might have the answer right in front of us with Noah Schultz on the team. But would love to know what members of the Worldwide Scouting Department think after going through this review. Next time around, we will check in on some of our former players, check in on some of the top prospects in our organization as we really kind of round out our thinking as far as what this roster might look like next year. We'll also check in on our initial plans for the player development lab. And then after that episode, we'll actually start making some big decisions and moving forward with this off season. Until the next time around, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.